All right, on today's episode, I have a guest with me. Her name is Amy Palmer. She's the founder of PEAC, or Parents of Estranged Adult Children. We'll share that website link with you as well. So let me get Amy on. Hi there, Amy. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Good evening. Thank you so much for having me.
Very good, very good. Yeah, I appreciate you coming. I've said for a long time doing the podcast that I like to have other people involved, just because then it's not just me. It's good to hear different perspectives and different experiences, and help other people to be able to cope in some way. Whatever you have might just resonate with just the right person, and as I'm sure you've experienced with your organization. So I know we'll get into it a little bit more later, but tell us a little about your organization.
Well, it's peace, and it is peace without an E, and that is Parents of Estranged Adult Children. I've been going since about 2017 when my then 18-year-old daughter estranged from me for the first time. And I was just devastated, as it can be so consuming. And normally an upbeat, outgoing person, I found myself becoming depressed and isolating myself. And I thought, I need help. And I started looking for a support group, and there wasn't one. So, at least not that I found in my
Right.
area. This is, of course, pre-COVID. So, I was looking for something in person, and I just decided, well, I guess I'm going to start one. So I really have no professional training. I was a broadcast journalism major and marketing in college. And so um, I just thought, well, I experienced this. I'm going to learn and research and do as much as I can, and hope to help others along the way as I started to heal myself. So that's peace in a nutshell.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was too. I was nearing the end of my actual estrangement with my son, and um, I just saw, because of the support group that I'm in on Facebook, that I'm one of the administrators in. I saw all these people across different countries, different walks of life, different religious beliefs, political beliefs, I mean, just all over the place. And I thought, my goodness, if we can just help some people not go through some of this stuff, or at least, I guess we can't keep them from going through it, but maybe um, knowing they're not alone is a huge thing. It was for me. Um, and then maybe help them find some of the coping skills that we've all gone through, that might make it not quite as unbearable for them. So that was
Yeah, I
my.
think that's, yeah.
Yeah, go
Well,
ahead.
you bring up a really good point, is just so many people over and over again that they thought they were the only one. There's so much shame in estrangement. You
Oh my goodness.
you think, what kind of parent am I, that my child doesn't want to have anything to do with me, and people judge you. They just do. And so we have a tendency of not to talk about it. And for me,
Yeah.
I just wanted to get the word out there. It's a silent epidemic. As you talked about, it's in every culture, it's in every country, it's in every income bracket, ethnicity, everything. It's just all over, and it's an epidemic, although a silent one, because they can't get the numbers on it, because so many people are filled with shame, and they don't
Yeah.
want to come out and say it. But
Well,
I'm
it's
I'm guessing, again, it's a guess, but almost everybody in their circle of influence knows somebody who's estranged, but they don't know it because they won't tell.
right. Well, it's kind of funny, um, on the podcast, when you're setting up to do a podcast. There's a lot of things you have to do. It's pretty easy to do, but there's a few things to do. Like, you want to choose some music. So I found some music that I really liked, and there's free places you can get it, where there's a whole bunch of different stuff. So I found this really cool music that I was drawn to it. And I started, I emailed the person who wrote the music. I found it on YouTube, or actually, I found it on a different site. But I emailed him, and I'm like, "Hey, listen, this is my deal. I'm doing this podcast. I am not monetizing it at this point. I'm just trying to help people out there get some help, and explain the estrangement and what I went through and whatever. Would you be okay with me using your music? Because I want to make sure, I have permission and whatever. And that way, if I do at some point monetize it, then I can address that, at that point, if he would like royalties or whatever. It wasn't a day or two that went by, I think the same day. And I believe the gentleman is German, if I remember correctly. So he sent me an email back. He said he's perfectly fine with that. As a matter of fact, he had been estranged from his son. They were now okay and talking, and he was actually there, I think, when he wrote me the email. They were having a day, but what out of all of the music that I could have chosen out there, how ironic, not necessarily good ironic, but is it that the person had gone through it? So that just what you're saying, it's an epidemic. So
Mhm.
sometimes it's worse than others for people. Sometimes, like in our group, sometimes the kids are just being jerks. They're
Mhm.
mad at them for whatever reason. It's been a few days or a week and they're not speaking to them. That's, a little different than what our group is about. So it's like, but there's so many different forms, I guess it can take, and so many different nuances that, that everybody's just going through it a little bit differently. So, but yeah, it's
For sure.
definitely,
There's a lot of things that are different, but there's a lot of commonalities as well.
for sure. And the shame you mentioned is absolute, because I was actually talking to a coworker recently, and expressing some of my issues that are going on. And well, you just have to, and she has no idea, you just have to put yourself there. You just have to, force it or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, I hear you, but you just don't understand. Unless you've been through it, I just don't think you can understand. Because why would this happen? Why would your child do this? You know,
Yeah.
um, and there doesn't ever seem to be. There's certainly not one answer. There's a multitude of them. So for sure.
You're absolutely right. The pain of estrangement is like no other, and you cannot understand it unless you've been through it. And I had
Yeah.
one lady in my very first group, peace group that we had back in 2017. She had lost a child in estrangement and then also a child in death. And she said
Mm.
estrangement was much more difficult for her. There wasn't any casseroles, there wasn't any finality in it, and
Yep.
there was no choice in it
Yep.
for um, so anyway, yeah, it's a very very difficult situation, and that's why the support groups and what you're doing, and myself, and all there's lots of others like us out there
Yeah.
trying to get the word out to educate people and to tell them that they're not alone, and those feelings, and that we're all going through them, different but same.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just going to say, actually, it's funny you said that, because there's several people in our Facebook support group that have lost, the same way. They've lost a son or daughter in estrangement, and then some of them don't have multiple children, but then in during the estrangement they died. So they really don't have that closure, and they have said it's difficult for someone who hasn't gone through that to say it, but although I've thought it, which is worse. I think it would almost be worse for for you to know they're still there, but they're just not speaking to you.
Right.
So
Yeah.
um but Yeah. Um, well, I'd like to talk about your mission in a little bit more detail in a few minutes. What about you though? You want to tell us a little about your story and what happened?
Sure. My daughter was 18 years old and she was still a senior in high school at the time. But because she was 18, there was not really anything we could do.
Right.
She basically had met a boy, a young man, and that started it. And we didn't know him well. He did not know us. And she basically just one day disappeared. We did not know where she was for about 6 months of time. And we went to the police, and of course they were no help. We went to friends, and she pretty much cut off contact with absolutely everyone except for this young man and his family. We went to the family, his parents, for help, and they uh, threatened police on us we just went to talk to find out more about our daughter. And we had references. We had people who were friends who we've known for 15, 20 years vouch for our character, trying to get help from them to find out where our daughter was, but they refused to help us. And
Wow.
so yeah, and that was started my journey with peace, to start that, to get help and support and educate myself. Our daughter did come back after being gone for about a year. And she came back and was with us for about 2 years. And that's another thing. If they estrange once, the probability of them estranging again is
Right.
high. And unbeknownst to us, she got back together with this boy, and she estranged again. There was never any fighting, or there wasn't a disagreement. I mean, there was nothing
Right.
for us. The only thing I could say, if there was a warning in my situation, was that my daughter and I were very close. We homeschooled, we spent a lot of time together, and we enjoyed the same things. And she started to pull away from me. She wouldn't, I'd say, do you want to watch a movie? Do you want to go for a hike or whatever? And she would start refusing. So she was pulling away from me. I guess in hindsight, when I look back, that would probably have been a sign. But
Yeah.
she's been estranged from us now for about 2.5 years. And again, everybody, not just my husband and I,
Yeah.
which is her dad, and her brother, but everyone. She's very close to her
Wow.
grandparents and her cousins, and she sees no one except for this young man that she's with.
Yeah,
And his
my son did a similar thing as far as everyone goes. We asked when this first started, we're like, listen, I don't want whatever's going on with us, I don't want it to affect you and your sisters. Please, please, please don't do that.
Yeah.
We're fine. I just don't want you guys to lose it, because I was never close with my siblings growing up. My wife wasn't either. Not really. We're both the babies, and they were much older, and
Mhm.
those kinds of things. So we just didn't want them to do that, but he did, and it caused a lot of issues. And it was just it was very difficult. So I hear that. And then like I said, while we're not estranged with no contact, I guess I should say. um Things are strained because of
Mhm.
different beliefs and certain things, and it's like I can feel that. Definitely feel that pulling away now, you know but we do have a granddaughter, and we got very, very close to her after we um, came back together. And I hope anyway they wouldn't do that, at least for her sake. But who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows? It's sad. Um,
Well, that's
and
one of the really difficult pieces is for siblings.
yeah,
My children are 12 months apart. I also have a son. They were very close, so it's painful not only for parents but other family
yeah.
members as well. And then you bring up grandchildren. I mean, that puts a whole
Oh,
nother level to it. And I've got several parents in my group that don't get to see their grandchildren. And one even had their grandson, who she was very close with, say, "Nana, why did you quit me?"
Oh,
How painful is that? So that just adds a whole nother layer to it.
yeah.
In my case, I don't, my daughter does not have children at this point, but that I think just is painful beyond words to not be able to have access to grandchildren.
It is. And when ours first started, she was 1.5, 2. So she was still very, very, she's just a toddler.
Mhm.
And we weren't terribly close then, but it was like when the estrangement started, you'd be out to dinner. You'd see seemingly what grandparent and grandchild
Yeah.
together, and it would be like, ugh,
Mhm.
right? Like the kids like to say, right in the feels.
Mhm.
So I had a bit of a difficult time with that myself, but
Understandably so.
now I think we've covered it. But so before this happened to you, had you heard of estrangement like this?
Absolutely not. I knew nothing about it. Like, as far, I shouldn't say that. Let me backtrack. I didn't know anything on a clinical definition of estrangement.
Right.
However, my husband's nephew has not seen his parents for a very long time. But I didn't understand that to be estrangement. I didn't know it.
Right.
Other than that,
You just
and
thought they weren't close.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Thank you. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't either. I mean, however, then going back, one of my episodes of the podcast, someone recommended to me to talk about generational estrangement. And when I looked back at my family, it's riddled with different forms of estrangement. I was estranged from my father. I did not know him since the time I was just telling somebody this earlier, 4 or 5 years old. And then he passed away when I was like 17 or 18.
Mm.
Never saw him after he initially left. So my sister had issues with, one of her kids, just all throughout. I just didn't recognize it in that way. Like you
Yeah.
said, I didn't just thought we weren't a very close family. We weren't Norman Rockwell, kind of
Right.
family. So,
Mhm.
um, and you already said that you and your husband, her father, were obviously together at the time. So,
Yeah.
um, did she have any issues with dad or
Well, interesting you should say that. I mean, we had a really pretty good family.
Mhm.
My husband and I have been married for 25 years.
Awesome?
He worked, I stayed home. We ate dinner together every night. We went to church on Sunday. Our kids were involved in things. So we had friends, we had family close by. The only caveat, I guess I would say, we have a son who I said was 12 months younger. He is disabled. He has
Yeah.
cerebral palsy. So a lot of our world
Mm.
evolved around him and his needs. We never made our daughter responsible for it at all. I mean, she was not
Right.
responsible for his care. And if he went to HIPAA therapy, she went riding right along with him. I mean, we, you know, really felt like we had a pretty good home. I mean, were we
Yeah.
perfect parents? Absolutely not. I mean, there's no such thing. We all do,
No.
that we wish we could do over, but, we were a pretty good family in that way.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, we tried to we thought we were too, and I really think we were.
Mhm.
Honestly. We My wife and I, this is my second marriage. She and my son is from my previous marriage, but she's always treated him like hers. I've
Yeah.
always treated hers like mine, and then we have one together. So
Yeah.
hers, mine, and ours. And we never we almost never, her and I almost never fight,
Mhm.
you know so they never saw that kind of relationship. We didn't really believe in corporal punishment,
Mhm.
although we really wanted to sometimes. So they've always had a roof over their head, food in their belly, and have what they needs.
Yep. That was,
Like you said, were we perfect? Absolutely not. And when we got back together, when I got back together with my son, and he explained some of the stuff, I'm like, oh, well, I had no idea you felt that way about that, and I didn't know that happened.
mm-hmm.
I had no clue. So it's like they just, I think some of it. I mean, they're a little older. My son's 30, 31 or 32 now, and but a lot of the, especially the now generation, it's so they don't talk about anything.
Right.
They, and I know kids to a point are always been like that. I know I was with my mom, but you know, it's just seems like a much different time, I guess.
Yeah.
I sound old, but
Mhm.
whatever. So with this, I know you went searching for groups and support and whatever. Did you ever seek out any professional help? I know I did.
I did not. I didn't. Once I got reading and educating and doing that, I really didn't feel that. And
Yeah,
in the past, for me, I think if therapy works for you, great. And I think people
right,
should always seek what works best for them.
for sure.
For me, therapy tended to focus on the negative things in my life and not the positive. So it wasn't a good fit for me.
Sure.
So that's why I didn't do it. But I think absolutely therapy should be
Yeah.
pursued if that's your jam.
Yeah, and it's funny I said that something about I was talking to somebody the other day if that's your jam. So it's kind of funny. Um, for me, I've had therapy in the past, but and I'm learning now with doing this support group and talking to people like you, that there's so many therapists out there that we'll just say aren't good,
Mhm.
and they just, some of them cause these estrangements. Some of them, the kids go for therapy and they say, oh, she's toxic or he's toxic. You need to cut him out. And I'm
Right.
like, without even knowing you, they say that. The kids could be saying anything, true or not true, or
Mhm.
from their perspective, or even if they don't mean to for it not to be true, but just to tell them, oh, just you don't need them in your lives. It dumbfounds me that they
Mhm.
do that. I've always been of the opinion in my group that I'm part of, and anybody that I talk to about this, that as long as you weren't physically, emotionally, or sexually abusive to them, there's no reason. I mean, yes, some parents I know are intense. Some kids are intense, but unless you fall under some of those things, at least in my view, there's you shouldn't just completely cut them out of your life. It's just, especially with no reason given,
Yeah.
and that just happens so often. So tune in next time when we continue our conversation with Amy. I'd like to again thank Amy for being on the show. I really appreciate your time. Please do remember, if you want to reach out to me, my email address is beyondthepainpodcast@gmail.com. And please try to remember to live beyond the pain.